Hello and welcome to a special broadcast of In India's Interest on News 9 Live. India is celebrating 25 years of its victory in the Kargil war against Pakistan in 1999. How was this done? Someone who led this operation as India's army chief joins us today on this special broadcast. General Malik, thank you very much for joining us. Let me begin by asking you about the challenges that you really faced. Could you remember, India is marking 25 years of the celebration now, but how do you remember those days of challenges in the year 1999?
Jai Hind, Aditya. Those were, I would say, worrisome weeks in the beginning. It came as a huge surprise because both at the political level as well as military level. Just a few months ago, earlier, our two prime ministers had signed Lahore Declaration in Lahore, and they had in that declaration said that we will not interfere in each other's security and internal politics. The intelligence agencies had no clues. In fact, they had told us that Pakistan is not capable of waging a war, and initially few people whom our troops saw in the first and second week, they were wearing salwar kameez, black salwar kameez. So the word was that these are jihadis who have entered, and jihadis had been infiltrating in Kashmir Valley for a long time earlier. So we had no clues really who these people were and how they had come and where they have sat down, because in that area we had large gaps between our posts for miles and miles. And so we had no clues exactly where they were sitting unless we managed to clash with each other. So it was a big surprise at all levels. And then there were challenges before us, because the challenges were, one, of course, intelligence not being there at all. As I told you, that we were told that Pakistan is not capable of waging a war against us, and yet the number we saw was much larger. Intelligence agencies kept insisting that these were jihadis. So that is another big problem. We did not know what their objectives are, what the final objectives are. Even when we realized that these were not jihadis but Pakistan Army, even then we were quite clueless for some time as to what were their objectives. The other challenges that we faced were, we were short of weapons, equipment, ammunition, because during that period, or a little earlier, we were short of funds, and the armed forces were asked to stay with 70% of its, what we were called those days, bottom line holdings. So we did not have complete equipment. Then, of course, the challenges of terrain. We did not have the kind of ammunition required, the clothing required, or the other equipment required to fight at that altitude. Mind you, Dras itself is 12,000 feet. And the fighting was taking place anything between 12,000 to 19,000 feet. At that altitude, you require acclimatization, couple of stages of acclimatization. That was another big challenge that we were facing. And we had to, of course, push in forces from other. Another challenge was that even we could not get anything from abroad, because those days the Western countries in particular, they had imposed sanctions on us after the nuclear test that we did in 1998. May 1998. So I would say huge surprise as well as big challenges that we were facing.
As you mentioned, initial reports indicated that these were mujahideen, so-called jihadis, really coming into the Indian territory. This was backed by international and Indian press reports and a narrative by Islamabad as well. How did you see this? Because you stood ground at the CCS and said that it doesn't seem like that these are jihadis.
Yes, two major reasons were, one was the intelligence agencies which were insisting that these were jihadis, and secondly, Pakistan was following a very effective deception plan. They did not disclose that these were Pakistan army people infiltrating in our territory. In fact, as you know, they did not even disclose it fully to their own Prime Minister or in public. And they had a lot of radio sets, radio stations working in the local language of that area. So the deception plan was that these are all jihadi people. But the manner in which these people came and they held the ground, these heights in our area, and then we saw the artillery fire coming in their support or the helicopters flying, that doesn't happen with the jihadis. So those are the kind of activities which convinced me that these are not jihadis, these are Pakistan army people. And my first direction to the formation there was, I want identification of these people. Even if we lose some people, I don't mind, but we must identify them. Our rules of engagement are different for the jihadis in counter-insurgency operation or counter-militancy operation. But when you are waging a war, then there is no inhibition, then you use the weapon, whichever is the best weapon that you available with you. So the major issue became that till I was convinced, I had to tell people that, look, we will follow rules of engagement, not in counter-insurgency operation, but for a war.
If I can ask you, politically, of course, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee was at the helm of affairs, chairing the CCS and monitoring the situation at Kargil. But what kind of a political support did you receive at that time? And as a military leader, what were the challenges and difficulties that you faced at that time, perhaps in terms of logistics, administration, or some kind of a decision making?
So firstly, I must say that we had full support of the government. While in the beginning, the Prime Minister himself was not sure who are these people who have infiltrated, and everybody thought that these are jihadis because of the kind of intelligence inputs were being given to them and to us. So it took some time for me to convince them in these security meeting that we were having, CCS meeting. But the Prime Minister was very supportive, and throughout. The other thing which was I noticed was that almost every day we were meeting each other, with the other people who were also involved. So we used to have almost sometimes even 2 or 3 meetings on the CCS, Cabinet Committee on Security. So the political side, I had no problem. They were supporting and with us, except for the beginning, as I mentioned to you. As far as technology is concerned, we had none of these things which are available today. We did not have night vision devices. Our posts were far away from each other. There were no ground sensors. There were no ground radars. There were no drones, UAVs, or satellite imagery. We did not have weapons locating radars. None of these things were existing. So if a helicopter flew over that area trying to find out if there is an infiltration or not, particularly during the period when there is so much of snow, they could not identify. So luckily, I'm glad that we have got now everything available to us. But those days, none of these things were available, and that was a major handicap.
So why exactly did Pakistan refuse to accept dead bodies? There were international media reports of these Pakistani soldiers that the Indian army buried in Kargil because Pakistan refused them. Why did this happen?
See, because of the deception plan that they were following, and they had not disclosed the truth either to their own government or to the public in Pakistan or to the international community. They did not want to accept the dead bodies of their soldiers even when we offered it to them. And so now the deception plan which they had occupied, it was now backfiring on them. Mind you, they did accept a few dead bodies which were offered by us, but selectively. They named some of them. One of them I remember was Major Colonel Mahmood or something, who was given the highest gallantry award by Pakistan after we had returned the body to him. So they selectively took a few bodies, but they left majority of these dead bodies of their soldiers with us.
So what was Pakistan's response to this defeat? Internally, domestically, and otherwise, how did Pakistan really react?
Well, as you know, that there was a problem between the political leadership, Prime Minister, as well as the Army Chief Pervez Musharraf. Firstly, I would say that when it became too much for them to suffer more casualties and they saw that the whole thing was now going against them, I would say end of June, when it became obvious that we will be able to throw them out. Not many people know that it was Pervez Musharraf who persuaded his Prime Minister to go to USA and to find a way out from this. That was one. And then after that, on the 6th of October, I think, Pervez Musharraf threw the Prime Minister out, and they the military took over the political authority in Pakistan. So despite the fact that they had been defeated and everybody in Pakistan public knew about it, but the military managed to, get back into power.
Could you also tell us about the terrain? Because this is not a normal war that was being fought. The terrain was very difficult. There was not as much technology that is available today. How difficult was it for your boys, for your soldiers to operate in that kind of a location, in that kind of a terrain?
It is not that it was unfamiliar. I had served in Ladakh even in 1962 during that war period, and I had served for 2 years in that area, not in Kargil but in Ladakh and eastern Ladakh. So the terrain was not new to me, but the difficulties of the terrain of employing large forces, that was. Now mind you, Dras is 12,000 feet high. Tiger Hill is, I think, 16,000 feet high. And some of the fighting that took place in that area was at 19,000 feet high. Now that was the kind of altitude where the boys, when they are inducted, they have to be acclimatized, not in one stage, but in 2 stages, this thing. Right. And we did not have adequate clothing for that terrain. You require snow clothing, you require also there are difficulties in using ammunition, because certain ammunition doesn't fire accurately at those altitudes. So those challenges were there, but one has to admire the troops that despite all these challenges, they were able to, recapture most of the heights during that period.
It's been 25 years, yes, but as someone who led that operation, what do you think were the lessons that India, the Indian government and the Indian military really learned from the Kargil war in 1999?
Look, there are many lessons. I think the first foremost is that despite the fact that today India, Pakistan, China, all three are nuclear nations, but when there is a territorial dispute, a war can still take place between the two nations. Don't think that because of the nuclear nations there will be no war. It may be a limited war, but a conventional war cannot be ruled out altogether. But that was a belief earlier, that is one. Second, I would say that when you are fighting counterinsurgency or counter-militancy operation, they cannot be at the cost of your preparation for a conventional war. It takes time for the boys to be oriented to the other side. Right. And we were heavily involved in 98, 99 in militancy, counter-militancy operations in J&K. Even the focus of 15 Corps was more in that area. The Another lesson I would like to recall, I would like to say is that you have to be dependent on your own capabilities. You cannot be hoping that somebody will come to help you in terms of ammunition or in terms of equipment. Those days we had these sanctions and none of these other countries, they were prepared to give us any help. And those who even managed to sell some ammunition, etc., we found they were dead ammunition, you know. So those difficulties, those challenges, we have to refuse that after some time. Another important lesson which must not be forgotten ever is on intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. This is required when you have such long borders and such difficult borders, LOC or LSC in that area. You cannot afford to neglect that. You have to remain alert. You have to have technology and equipment which can carry out surveillance, because you can't post people every few yards. You have to have gaps. So that those gaps have to be covered with technology. So this is another important lesson, and I'm glad that today we have this kind of technology required in the mountains. Then I would say I mentioned to you about the support from the political authority. See, the war has to be guided. I'm talking of a war. It has to be guided by the political authority. And we were fortunate that we had a government which was keeping our military in the loop during the duration of that war. What I would like to say is that, look, it's not only important for the duration of during that war time, but it is also important for the military to be kept in the loop even before that, because you never know when you have to suddenly fight a war. So it is important for the military to be kept in the security strategic loop right from the beginning, along with the political authority. Then an important lesson that we learned, you know, a lot of people say that Kargil war was a televised war. So we were in the transition, you know, we had never fought a war like that. Right. Now we were in a transition, we had suddenly facing the cameras all over the place, not just the journalists as such on the ground, but the cameras were following us. So you have to have a proper information strategy, you know, both to be able to support you, to be able to speak the truth that is available, to be able to maintain the morale of your own people, because that is important, and also to make sure that the other side, you know, they cannot, their morale is lowered when you were speaking the truth. And the media was a great help, I must say, during the war, because they were exposing the Pakistanis' deception plan and whatever was going on very effectively. And I must say that they supported us also, although it was little difficult because they would go all over the place and they would start talking to the Jawans, etc. But whatever was given, the briefing that was done by us, and you know, we followed a briefing pattern that every day in Delhi we had somebody from the Army, somebody from the Air Force, Navy, and the MEA rep, Joint Secretary X, all three of them briefing the media every day. So they were giving that. So we followed that strategy, which was very effective, I would say. So we have to now work out a media strategy as soon as you think that there is a war, likelihood of a war. And the last, I would, I have to mention that the man behind the gun remains very important, and the leadership. I think there can be no better example of such people and such leaders as we saw in. So we have to keep thinking of maintaining high standard of leadership and totally dedicated manpower taking great pride in their own nation as well as in their regiment, as we do currently.
Pakistan, of course, has continued this proxy war over the years in Jammu and Kashmir. But do you think today, now that you look back, that Pakistan can dare to do Kargil once again?
I don't think so. Why? Because Kargil was an area where we were thinly deployed, and we used to pull out some of our posts during winter. That is not happening today, and we have additional troops deployed in all those areas. That is one. And the second thing is that today we are following a proactive strategy, and we are giving it back to them without waiting for any orders from the top. And in fact, I would say that even the political authority is encouraging us to take retaliatory action as soon as possible. And then looking at their own status, Pakistan, the gap between Pakistan and ours in power is now big, and they know it, that if they would try and do something, they will face a huge retaliation.
After Pulwama in 2019 and Galwan clash in 2020, India strategically has isolated Pakistan completely. India is not giving as much of interest towards Pakistan, but the strategic focus has shifted completely towards China. Do you think this was a strategic, calculated step that India took, and something perhaps that should have happened years ago?
No, I agree with you. I think it should have happened earlier. And as I said, that the national power gap between us and Pakistan has been increasing considerably. And we have been able to, that is how we have been able to check militancy even in Kashmir. And we've been able to abrogate Article 370. So while we have to remain alert, no doubt about that, and we have to follow proactive strategy against Pakistan, whether it is international border or LOC. But our focus now has to be on China. And I think we are working on that. The additional deployment of the forces, improvement of communications in eastern Ladakh and other areas, all those steps are being taken now. But as you said, I would have liked it to happen much earlier and not wait for Pulwama or any of those things happen.
So do you think that the surgical strike that happened after the Uri terror attack in 2016 and the Balakot airstrike that happened after the Pulwama terror attack demonstrated a paradigm shift in India's national security and the robustness of our preparation, something that either we lacked or there wasn't a political will earlier?
Yes, it is. It is important, and I'm glad that we are doing it. I think there has been a paradigm shift after the surgical strike that we took, and particularly Balakot strike that we took. Now Pakistan knows that we are not inhibited in any manner, and we can retaliate the way we want to. And I must also tell you that even in 2020, when we have been, since then we have been confronting China. Even in 2020, when we started facing Chinese troops on the LAC, we have been proactive, whether it was Galwan or our occupation of Kailash range during that period. So these are proactive steps. So I'm quite happy, and I think it's a good thing that we have now started adopting proactive strategy. Proactive strategy is the first step to for deterrence strategy, so which is a good thing.
Finally, do you think that India is prepared for a two-front war challenge? But as a military leader, what will be your suggestion for India's preparedness, for Indian Army's preparedness?
Firstly, let's not talk of Indian Army. Today we are now talking of integrated forces, you know, Army, Navy and Air Force working together, and that is why today you have CDS and you have theaterization being discussed. So it's a question of our military power as such. Yes, we cannot rule out Pakistan and China working together. Looking at the way China has been supporting Pakistan since 1963 and continues to support them on strategic issue. So we cannot rule out a two-front war, and therefore we have to be prepared for that. But having said that, I think it is also a major task for our diplomacy and at political level that we should try and ensure that this kind of support with each other between Pakistan and China, it is minimized to the extent it is possible. So they have to continue, they must continue working on that part.
You know, as someone who led this entire operation to victory, and history has remembered you as a military leader, you know, who took the Kargil war to this victory, and you know, every year we celebrate this as a Vijaydiwas. How would you want the nation and history to remember Kargil?
Firstly, I would like people to remember those who sacrificed their life, the soldiers, you know, for the sake of integrity of our country. They must be remembered, they should not be forgotten. I think it is a responsibility of the government as well as of the society to remember them and to meet people who lost their sons during that. And I would like to see many people visiting that ground, because nothing motivates them better than when you go and see that ground where these boys. So that is important, and as I said, we have to remain alert always, notwithstanding the kind of Lahore Declaration or any other peace talk. The task of a soldier is to remain alert along the border. There are many of these lessons that we have discussed earlier. They must be followed. They must be followed up, not only in letter but both in letter and spirit. Like, for example, theaterization, we have been talking about it. We should try and complete it as early as possible, and we should continue to follow a proactive strategy against both Pakistan as well as China.